I hid my pregnancy from the Mafia boss. He saw me at the ultrasound. Why didn't you tell me? Before we begin, drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. And once the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. Oh, and make sure to follow our channel for more stories like this. Now, sit back and enjoy every detail. Isabella Romano had been gone for 2 months. But the weight of Adrian Moretti's name still clung to her like a shadow she couldn't outrun. And now she stood in the cramped bathroom of her rented room in Queens, staring at the positive pregnancy test as her breath caught in her throat. Her fingers trembled uncontrollably as she held the test closer, hoping she had misread it, but the 2 pink lines remained sharp and undeniable, slicing through her chest. The cold tile under her feet did nothing to steady the shaking in her legs, and she gripped the sink to anchor herself as her heartbeat echoed painfully in her ears. She closed her eyes, but the truth followed her into the darkness, pressing against her ribs like something alive. Her heart broke open all over again, not from fear, though fear was there too, but from the memory of the man she had run from. Adrian's face appeared behind her eyelids, the hard jaw, the cold eyes that softened only for her, the voice that could shatter her resolve with a single whisper. She swallowed tightly, forcing the air into her lungs as tears blurred her vision. "I can't let Adrian know," she whispered to the empty room, her voice cracking like old glass. It felt wrong to say his name out loud after weeks of silence, but it also felt like surrendering to a truth she didn't want to face. She imagined his reaction, the rage that would rise in him like a storm, the possessiveness that always burned just beneath the surface, the way he would step closer until her breath tangled with his. "He'll pull this child into his world," she said, trying to steady her voice, but it wavered again. "I won't let that happen." She placed the test on the counter with trembling care, as if it were fragile enough to break and rewrite her fate. The bathroom mirror reflected a version of herself she barely recognized, pale, exhausted, heart-bruised, but holding a strength she hadn't known she possessed. Leaving New York was the only decision that had felt safe, but even that safety felt thin and temporary. She had moved quietly, taking a small room in Queens under a different last name, keeping her hood up in public, avoiding every street that reminded her of him. She told herself she was invisible now, hidden from his eyes, his world, his reach. But she could never hide from the ache in her chest each night. Every time she closed her eyes, she remembered how he used to say her name in the dark, low and rough, like a confession he didn't know how to make. She remembered the warmth of his hands on her waist, the way his anger softened when she touched his cheek, the way he looked at her like she was the only piece of peace he had ever known. Those memories hurt more than anything else. She pressed a hand to her stomach, feeling a warmth that made her eyes burn. This child was innocent. This child deserved a life far from guns, from secrets, from violence, from Adrian's shadowed kingdom. Still, the truth tore at her, because even as she promised to protect the baby, her heart betrayed her with a whisper she couldn't silence. She still loved him. She had never stopped. And that hurt more than the fear, more than the loneliness, more than the trembling test on the sink. It was the kind of love that stayed even when she ran, the kind of love that lived in the hollow of her ribs, aching and stubborn and unbearably alive. As a tear slipped down her cheek, Isabella pressed her forehead to the cool mirror and let herself break. Just for a moment, because she knew that no matter how far she ran from Adrian Moretti, she could never escape the part of her heart that still belonged to him. Adrian Moretti paced the darkened streets of Manhattan, the cold night air doing nothing to cool the fire that raged within him. His leather coat brushing against his sharp frame as the city whispered his name in fearful tones. And every shadow seemed to bend beneath his presence. A silent recognition that he had become more violent, colder, untouchable. And yet relentless in a single pursuit, finding Isabella Romano, the woman who had left him and carried away a piece of his soul. The streetlights flickered as he moved, each step precise, calculated. His mind replaying every trace of her scent, every memory of her laughter, every way she had once dared to defy him. And he clenched his fists, his knuckles widening. Because the thought that she was out there, unseen, unclaimed, and hidden from him, burned through his chest like fire. In Brooklyn, he stopped outside her old apartment building. The one where she had lived before vanishing. And his eyes scanned every balcony, every window. Every flicker of light as if she might be watching him from behind the curtains. Knowing she could never resist the pull of him forever. He knocked once on the door that no longer belonged to her. Listening to the hollow echoes of the empty halls. The creak of the staircase, imagining her soft footsteps. Imagining her eyes widening in fear or surprise if she dared to peek at him. And yet he felt a hollow absence, a reminder that she had slipped through his grasp before. And he would not allow it to happen again. From Brooklyn, he drove to Manhattan, the streets dark and slick from a late rain. The city alive but trembling beneath the stories that followed his name. Every pedestrian giving him a wide berth, whispers of fear and awe following him like a tide of invisible waves. Because Adrian Moretti was not a man to cross. And anyone who tried to shield Isabella would face consequences they could not imagine. At the small bookstore she had once worked at. He lingered outside the display window, watching the rows of books. Remembering how she had leaned against the counter. How her eyes had lit up when she spoke about stories. And a flash of pain crossed his face because she had left without warning. Leaving him with nothing but fragments of memory and a relentless need to reclaim what was his. He ran a hand through his dark hair, the tension in his shoulders visible even to the distant passerby who didn't dare meet his gaze, because the name Adrian Moretti carried weight beyond fear. It carried inevitability, and he was determined to find her, no matter how long it took. He moved from street to street, cafe to cafe, every place she had once loved. Every small corner of New York that had witnessed her presence. And he whispered into the empty night, his voice low and powerful. "You think you can hide from me, Bella? You belong with me," the words slicing through the silence like a blade, a promise of obsession, protection, and a threat that no one could hear without shivering. As he paused outside a favorite cafe on Fifth Avenue. He imagined her laughing there, sipping coffee, oblivious to the storm he had become in her absence. And he clenched his jaw, his lips pressing into a thin line. The city around him fading as his focus narrowed entirely on finding her. Reclaiming her, and discovering the secret she had kept from him. Every night he returned to the streets, walking slowly, observing every shadow, watching every stranger's face for a hint, a whisper, a clue that might lead him to her. His mind did not waver, his patience infinite. Yet the intensity never dulled. Because he knew she was out there, hiding. Holding on to a secret he could not yet fathom. A secret that was far greater than mere distance or fear. A secret that beat within her, unstoppable and alive. As he moved through the city with a single, unwavering purpose. He remembered every word she had ever said, every glance she had ever given him, every moment they had shared before she vanished, and it fueled a fire inside him that no rain, no cold, no darkness could extinguish. Adrian's eyes scanned alleyways, rooftops, quiet corners, imagining her fleeing from him. Imagining the fear and love tangled in her heart. And it only sharpened his resolve, because he would not fail this time. He envisioned confronting her, the moment she realized he had found her. The clash of longing and anger, the unspoken words that would tear between them. And the truth that would surface no matter how hard she tried to conceal it. He felt a weight on his chest, a pull toward the unknown. Because what she was hiding was not just her heart, it was something even more precious. Something that belonged to both of them in a way he could not yet grasp. As he wandered through Times Square. The neon lights painting his face in red and gold. The crowd parting instinctively before him. He let his mind linger on the idea of her smile. Her defiance, the way she had once challenged him. And how the challenge had only drawn him closer, like a moth to a flame. Every taxi honk, every distant shout, every footstep echoed in his ears as if the city itself were reminding him of her absence. And he clenched his teeth, feeling the pulse of both rage and desire coursing through him in equal measure. He imagined her in Queens, alone in her small apartment, unaware that he was closing in, unaware that he could sense her heartbeat from blocks away, unaware that nothing could truly hide her from Adrian Moretti. Every building became a landmark, every park a clue. Every cafe a possible hiding place, and he catalogued them all silently. Moving with predator-like precision, invisible and unstoppable, relentless and merciless in his pursuit. He remembered the warmth of her hands, the softness of her laugh, the vulnerability she had tried to hide from him. And it only made his determination harder, sharper, colder. Because he would protect her and possess her at the same time. He imagined what would happen when he finally saw her again, the shock in her eyes, the tremble in her voice, and the undeniable truth that she could not resist him, not fully, not ever. Every step he took carried the weight of obsession and love, every breath a promise that she could not outrun, every glance a reminder that the city belonged to him in more ways than one. Adrian's mind raced with every possible scenario, every way she might try to deceive him, every attempt she could make to hide, and he smiled darkly, knowing she could not keep her secrets forever. The thought of her alone, hiding, carrying something precious, something he didn't yet understand, filled him with a strange mixture of dread and desire, because the stakes had grown higher than ever before. The streets of New York became his hunting ground, the night his ally, and every whisper of wind carried her name directly to his ears. He imagined seeing her face pale when she realized he had been following every trace of her, every heartbeat, every soft whisper of movement. His patience was both infinite and terrifying, a shadow of himself walking through a city that feared him but could not contain him. Each step brought him closer, yet the tension stretched infinitely, because he sensed her secret, something she was hiding, a life that belonged to both of them, something he would soon discover and never let go. His hands itched to touch her again, to claim her, to protect her from dangers he could sense but she could not, while also reclaiming the peace of his heart she had always carried away with her. Every alley, every cafe, every bookstore became a potential battleground between fear and love, between concealment and revelation, between desire and danger. And Adrian moved through it all with a single-minded intensity. He whispered again into the night, barely audible, "Bella. You belong with me," and it was both a threat and a plea, a warning and a declaration, a promise that he would not stop until he had her, until he knew she and the life she carried were safe within his grasp. The city hummed around him, alive but inconsequential. For Adrian Moretti's mind held only one focus, Isabella Romano, the woman who had left him. And the secret she carried that he was determined to uncover. Bella Romano walked briskly along the quiet streets of Queens, the early morning light barely breaking through the clouds as she kept her oversized hoodie pulled tightly around her, her glasses sliding slightly down her nose, and her head bowed low to avoid recognition. The weight of the secret she carried pressing heavily against her chest. A constant reminder of the life growing inside her and the danger that lingered in every corner of the city. She clutched her small purse tightly, feeling the familiar tremor in her hands that never seemed to fade, and whispered softly to her stomach, "I'll protect you. Even from your father," her voice barely audible, carrying both love and fear into the stillness of the quiet Queen's morning. Every step toward the small clinic felt like a mile. The cement beneath her sneakers cold and unyielding. And she imagined the eyes of strangers on her. The possibility that someone might recognize her. Someone who could carry news back to Adrian Moretti. And her heart ached with anticipation and dread. The clinic appeared modest, unassuming, almost invisible among the other buildings on the block. But to her it represented both hope and terror. A fragile sanctuary where she might witness her child for the first time. And yet it was impossible to feel completely safe anywhere in New York City when she was hiding from Adrian. She entered the narrow hallway, the scent of antiseptic sharp in her nostrils, her heart hammering in rhythm with her anxious thoughts. And she kept her eyes down, observing the small tiles beneath her feet, the soft hum of fluorescent lights overhead, the quiet murmur of voices that belonged to people who had no idea the storm that had followed her from Manhattan was lurking beyond the city streets. Each step closer to the receptionist's desk made her stomach twist in knots. A mixture of anticipation, fear, and love coiling inside her, reminding her that every heartbeat of her unborn child was a secret Adrian could never know about. Not yet. When the nurse's soft voice called out, "Isabella Romano?" She froze mid-step, a cold shiver running down her spine, her throat tightening as if the air itself had become heavy with the weight of revelation. And she took a slow, steadying breath, pushing down the panic that threatened to overtake her. Her legs moved almost mechanically as she approached the room. Each step measured, controlled, an attempt to maintain the calm she desperately needed. Even as her pulse raced like a drumbeat against the fragile walls of her composure. She pushed the door open quietly, stepping into the ultrasound room, where the soft light and the faint hum of machinery offered a temporary sense of calm. A small pocket of normalcy in a world that had become anything but safe. Bella lowered herself onto the examination bed, her hoodie falling around her shoulders, her hands resting protectively over her stomach as she whispered another soft promise, "You're safe with me." Always, the words trembling against her lips but filled with unwavering determination. The technician greeted her with a polite smile, unaware of the storm behind her eyes. Of the fear that Adrian Moretti's name still carried. Of the secret that could ignite a fire she was desperately trying to contain. As the gel was applied to her belly, a shiver ran down her spine. A mixture of cold from the substance and nerves from the anticipation of seeing the first real image of her child. The tiny life that made her choices so dangerous and so vital. She held her breath as the screen flickered to life. The ultrasound image appearing in grainy black and white. And her eyes softened, tears forming unbidden at the miracle before her. A heartbeat that was hers and his, a small life she had sworn to protect at any cost. She whispered softly to the screen, "I'll keep you safe. I promise," the words carrying both love and fear, a private conversation between mother and child, untouched by the outside world and the man she still loved but feared above all else. Her hands shook as she adjusted her hoodie, pulling it closer around her shoulders. A barrier between herself and any potential threat, her mind scanning the room. Imagining every possible way someone could discover her location. Every shadow becoming a potential danger, every sound amplified in her anxious awareness. The hum of the machine, the soft tapping of keys on the nearby computer, even the quiet footsteps of a nurse passing in the hallway outside, made her heart jump with tension. A constant reminder that safety was fleeting, that peace was temporary, and that the city itself seemed to conspire against the tranquility she sought. She traced her fingers lightly over her stomach, feeling the tiny movements within. Imagining Adrian's reaction if he could see this moment. And the pain of secrecy cut through her like a blade. Sharper than anything she had experienced in the months since she left him. Bella swallowed hard, trying to steady her breathing. To focus on the life growing inside her, to cling to the fragile hope that she could raise her child away from the violence. Away from Adrian's reach, and yet the thought of him never fully left her mind. The specter of his obsession a constant echo at the edges of her awareness. She shifted slightly on the bed, adjusting herself for comfort. Though her heart pounded relentlessly, each beat a reminder of both the miracle she carried and the danger she could not escape. Her eyes scanning the small room for any clue of interruption. Any sign that someone might breach this sanctuary and reveal her secret. The ultrasound screen moved slightly as the technician adjusted the machine. And Bella's gaze stayed fixed on the tiny shape of her unborn child, her lips moving in a silent prayer. Her mind whispering promises of protection, safety, and love. A vow she made for both herself and the small life entrusted to her care. Every soft sound, every flicker of light, every slight movement in the room heightened her alertness. Her instinct sharpened by months of careful hiding, months of constant vigilance. Months of running from a man whose presence still haunted her heart. She adjusted her glasses nervously, wiped a tear from her cheek, and focused on the screen again. Willing herself to remain calm, willing herself to believe, for just this moment, that she was invisible, untouchable, and safe. Her fingers traced imaginary patterns across her belly, imagining the tiny heartbeat syncing with her own. A rhythm of life that strengthened her resolve. That reminded her why she had fled, why she had kept her distance. And why she could never let Adrian know, not yet. She imagined raising the child in peace, in a world where fear and obsession did not dictate every movement. Where she could breathe without the shadow of Adrian looming over every corner. And yet she knew that such freedom was fragile, temporary, and uncertain. The hum of the machine, the soft beeping of the monitor, the quiet shuffle of the technician's hands, all became part of a symphony of tension and hope. And she allowed herself to feel a small sense of calm, even as the knot in her stomach never fully loosened. Bella whispered another soft promise to her unborn child. "No matter what comes, I will protect you," the words firm yet gentle, carrying the weight of her determination and the depth of her love. A love that existed despite fear, despite danger, despite everything. She breathed in slowly, counting each second, grounding herself, reminding herself that this moment, fleeting though it may be, was hers to claim. Her private sanctuary in a world that had never been kind. She shifted slightly, listening to the soft instructions of the technician, nodding and murmuring polite acknowledgments, all the while maintaining a careful awareness of the door, the hallway. The possibility that the fragile veil of her safety could be ripped away at any second. Every detail of the room was etched into her mind, the faint smell of antiseptic, the pale walls, the soft hum of machines, the distant sounds of the city, and she clung to them as markers of normalcy. Markers of the small control she still held. Bella's heartbeat slowed marginally as the first clear image of her child filled the screen, and she allowed herself a brief smile. A connection that was entirely hers, entirely private, and entirely sacred. A life she would guard fiercely against any threat, even if it came from the man who had once held her heart. She whispered once more, barely audible, "I see you. I love you," feeling both hope and fear intertwine in her chest, a delicate, fragile balance that she would carry for months to come. The moments stretched slowly, each second filled with significance, each glance at the screen a reminder of the life she protected and the secret she carried, a treasure she could not yet share. She imagined the child's tiny movements, the flutter of a heartbeat against her fingers, and the warmth of hope that coursed through her veins. Every shadow in the room became a possibility, every sound a potential threat, yet she held herself steady, determined to finish this appointment and maintain the fragile illusion of safety. Bella's mind wandered briefly to Adrian, the memory of his voice, his gaze, and she swallowed hard, reminding herself that he could not know, that this secret was hers alone. She traced her fingers lightly over her stomach again, whispering a soft prayer for protection, for calm, and for strength, promising that no matter what happened, she would not let anything harm this small life. She felt a sense of both empowerment and fragility, the paradox of being strong yet vulnerable, a mother already fighting battles before her child had even arrived. The technician's soft instructions guided her through the remainder of the ultrasound, and Bella followed dutifully. Every movement measured, every word carefully spoken, maintaining the composure she had spent months cultivating. She imagined leaving the clinic safely, returning to her hidden apartment, resuming her carefully constructed life, and yet the thought of being followed, discovered, or tracked never fully left her mind. A constant shadow lingering at the edges of every step. Bella allowed herself a final glance at the screen, imprinting the image in her memory, a permanent reminder of the life she carried, and whispered once more, "I will keep you safe." No matter what, her words carrying the fierce, protective love that defined her every action. She slowly stood, brushing her hoodie into place, adjusting her glasses, and exhaling with a mix of relief and tension, knowing that while this moment had been hers, safety was only temporary, and vigilance must continue. She paused at the door for a moment, glancing back at the small room, committing every detail to memory, before stepping into the hallway, blending quietly into the world outside, still hidden, still cautious, still carrying a secret that could change everything, but determined to protect it at any cost. Isabella's eyes were glued to the ultrasound screen, the tiny flickering heartbeat of her baby pulsing in rhythm with her own. A fragile, miraculous rhythm that made her chest ache with love and fear all at once. And she felt the tears running down her cheeks as she smiled softly, whispering, "I see you. I love you. I'll protect you," each word trembling yet firm. A silent promise to the life she carried, a life that was a secret she had guarded fiercely. And for the first time since leaving Adrian, she allowed herself to feel a sliver of peace, unaware that it was about to be shattered. The quiet hum of the machine filled the small room, mingling with the soft tapping of the technician's fingers on the keyboard, the occasional murmur of instructions, and the distant sounds of the city beyond the clinic walls. A delicate bubble of normalcy and safety that had protected her for these precious minutes. And she breathed slowly, grounding herself in the miracle she was witnessing. Then, without warning, the clinic door burst open, slamming against the wall with a force that made her start, her head snapping toward the sound as her stomach tightened and her pulse spiked in an instant. Fear and anticipation colliding violently in her chest. Because there was only one person whose presence could make the blood drain from her face in a heartbeat. Rainwater dripped from the edge of a dark coat that glistened under the fluorescent lights. Droplets falling from the shoulders of a figure standing in the doorway, breath coming in sharp, heavy bursts. His eyes dark and intense as they locked immediately on the ultrasound monitor. Adrian Moretti. The name alone could freeze the city, could make the strongest men falter. And now he was here, in her private sanctuary. And the reality hit her like a bullet, leaving her stunned, unable to move or speak. Every muscle frozen with fear and longing intertwined. His coat clung to him in wet darkness, the rain making his sharp features even more severe, yet there was something in his gaze, softening slightly as he looked at the flickering image of their child. A tenderness buried beneath the years of anger, obsession, and distance. His voice, low and cracking in a way Isabella had never heard before, broke the silence of the room and made her chest constrict. "Why didn't you tell me, Bella?" Each word landed like a hammer, heavy, urgent, filled with a mixture of pain, disbelief, and longing, and for a moment, Isabella could do nothing but stare at the floor, unable to meet his eyes, her body frozen in shock. The words echoed in her mind, reminding her of every choice she had made to protect the child, every secret she had kept, every night she had whispered promises into the darkness. "I will keep you safe," and now the truth was facing her in the form of the man who had never truly left her heart. She swallowed hard, her lips trembling as she finally whispered back, her voice small but defiant, "Because your world is dangerous," the words carrying both fear and truth. A shield between her and him, a barrier she hoped would protect them both from the chaos his presence always brought. Adrian's jaw tightened, his hands curling slightly at his sides. But his eyes softened as they returned to the screen, lingering on the tiny flicker of life that was both theirs. A child neither had yet fully claimed, a reminder of love, hope, and the future he had never imagined would exist. He stepped forward, slow and deliberate, every movement calculated, controlled, yet filled with an emotion he could no longer suppress. The room shrinking around them until nothing existed but him, her, and the tiny heartbeat flickering on the screen. Isabella's breath caught in her throat as she felt the intensity of his gaze. The combination of anger, longing, and something softer. Something that made her heart ache and her stomach twist. Because she had never stopped loving him. And she realized that no matter how hard she tried, no secret could change the connection that still bound them together. Rain dripped from his hair onto the floor, forgotten, as he stood over her, studying the monitor, studying her, studying the life that was theirs. And every heartbeat felt amplified, every sound in the room a drumbeat to the tension that filled the air. A tension she could feel deep in her bones. She pressed her hands instinctively to her belly, as if the contact could anchor her, could ground her in the moment and give her courage. Even as the presence of Adrian Moretti made her entire body tremble, torn between fear and a yearning she had tried to suppress for months. His eyes flicked from the monitor to her face, noting the tears, the slight quiver of her lips, the way her hands protected the life within her. And something unspoken passed between them, a silent understanding, a shared recognition of the bond that could not be denied. No matter the distance, no matter the secrets. The air in the small room felt heavy, electric, charged with emotion and the weight of years spent apart. And Isabella felt a pull in her chest, a dangerous pull. The kind that had always made her weak before, and yet stronger in the face of the life she carried. Adrian's voice softened, a low murmur that brushed against her ears even as he remained standing over the machine. "Our child," he said, almost reverently. And she felt the tremor in her heart at the acknowledgement, at the connection. At the fact that he had finally realized what she had kept hidden. What she had protected with every ounce of her being. She wanted to look at him, to speak, to move. But her body betrayed her, frozen by the intensity of the moment. By the torrent of feelings that surged within her. Love and fear colliding in a storm she could not control. He stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking with each measured movement. His eyes never leaving the monitor, yet somehow finding hers in the corner of their gaze. A magnetic pull neither could deny, and she felt her breath hitch in response, knowing that the next moment could change everything. Her hands tightened over her stomach instinctively. A protective gesture, a silent warning and a plea for safety. And yet she could not hide the trembling hope that his presence, his gaze, his voice, might also bring her relief. Might also bring the acknowledgement that she was not alone in this world. And that their child was not alone either. The room felt suffocating in its intensity. Every heartbeat of the baby echoing in her chest. Mirroring the tumultuous rhythm of their own hearts, the past, present, and future converging in one fragile, unstoppable moment. She could hear the faint drip of water from his wet coat hitting the tile. The soft hum of the ultrasound machine, the distant murmur of the city beyond the walls. Yet nothing distracted her from the gravity of what was unfolding. The undeniable truth that Adrian Moretti had found her. Had seen the evidence, had finally confronted her. And she could not look away even if she wanted to. His hands remained at his sides. But the tension in his shoulders, the slight flex of his jaw, the softness that flickered in his eyes, spoke volumes. And Isabella felt herself leaning ever so slightly toward the machine. Seeking some solace, some anchor in the shared miracle of their child. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came. And the room stretched in suspended time, a suspended reality where nothing existed outside the small circle of life on the screen. The mother holding her child within, and the father standing over them both. Fierce, protective, and unexpectedly vulnerable. Adrian's gaze lingered on the tiny flicker of life. The movement almost imperceptible yet profoundly powerful. And Isabella felt tears slip freely down her cheeks. Each one carrying relief, fear, love, and surrender. A cocktail of emotions that left her trembling, yet resolute. He stepped just a fraction closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his presence. Yet careful, deliberate, not wanting to overstep. Not wanting to frighten her, and she felt her body respond. Heart racing, stomach twisting, a potent mix of apprehension and longing. The room held its breath with them, the world outside forgotten. The city fading into a distant hum, and for the first time in months, Isabella allowed herself to fully acknowledge the truth she had tried to hide. Adrian had not only found her. He had discovered their secret, and now nothing could remain the same. Her fingers brushed the edge of the screen, tracing the outline of the tiny life within her. A silent gesture of protection and love, while Adrian's gaze remained fixed. Fierce yet softened, powerful yet vulnerable. And she realized that in that single moment, the distance, the months apart, the fear, and the secrets all converged into an undeniable, fragile, breathtaking reality. She swallowed hard, her lips trembling, her chest tightening as the weight of what was happening pressed down on her, a mixture of fear, awe, and love, all entangled and unstoppable. The rain dripping from his coat onto the clinic floor went unnoticed, the world outside forgotten. The fluorescent lights reflecting off his dark hair, the intensity of his eyes, and the impossibility of the moment leaving her breathless, frozen, and yet alive in a way that only they could share. Every heartbeat of the baby echoed in her chest, and she whispered softly, "Please? Keep us safe," a plea that went unspoken but fully understood. A promise that tethered her and Adrian to the fragile, powerful life between them. Adrian Moretti's voice dropped to a low, fragile whisper, a tone Isabella had never heard from him before, carrying a mix of anger, sorrow, and desperate love as he asked, "You think I'd hurt my own child?" The words hung in the air, heavy and charged. And Isabella's eyes immediately filled with tears. The ache she had carried for months crashing into the reality of seeing him kneel before her, vulnerable yet fierce. And the world seemed to narrow until nothing existed except the two of them and the tiny life beating within her. She swallowed hard, her throat tight, as the weight of everything she had hidden pressed against her chest, and she whispered shakily, "You hurt me, Adrian. I was scared of you, the admission spilling from her lips like a confession she had held back for far too long, exposing the fragility of her heart and the terror that had followed her for months. Adrian's jaw clenched, and he closed his eyes, his fingers curling into fists at his sides, the words piercing him deeper than any blade, striking at the core of his being, leaving him raw and trembling with a combination of guilt and longing he could no longer suppress. He opened his eyes slowly, the fire in them tempered with pain and regret, and he murmured, his voice barely audible, "I was angry. Not at you. At myself. I didn't deserve you," each word laden with remorse. A confession of the torment he had carried in silence. The rage he had directed at the world and himself. And the realization that losing her had been his greatest failure. He lowered himself carefully to his knees beside her, the polished towel cold against his suit. Yet he remained focused entirely on her, on the baby, on the fragile connection that bound them together even after months of distance and fear. His fingers shook slightly as he reached out, hovering just above her belly. A hesitant touch that carried the weight of protection, longing, and an almost unbearable tenderness. A gesture that spoke louder than words ever could. Isabella flinched for a moment, the vulnerability of the contact reminding her of the dangers of Adrian's world. Yet she could not pull away, could not deny the warmth and security that radiated from him. A force stronger than any fear she had carried alone. The room seemed to shrink around them, the walls fading into insignificance as the intensity of the moment enveloped them. Every sound, every breath, every heartbeat amplified in the quiet space. A symphony of love, regret, and longing. Adrian's hand rested lightly on her belly, tracing a protective arc as though willing the child to feel only safety and nothing else. His thumb brushing softly against her skin, and she felt a jolt of both fear and relief, knowing that he could not be more present and more dangerous at the same time. Her gaze fell to the side, unable to meet his, because she feared that if she looked into his eyes, the dam holding back her emotions would break, and the fragile control she had maintained would shatter, leaving them both exposed to the torrent of feelings that had been brewing for months. He leaned slightly closer, his forehead almost touching hers as he whispered softly, "Bella. Don't leave again," a plea that was both a command and a confession, a surrender of his pride and a declaration of his intent to protect her and their child at all costs. Isabella's chest tightened, her hands instinctively resting over his. Feeling the warmth of his skin, the tremor in his fingers, the steady, relentless intensity of his gaze even as her own eyes avoided his, and the room seemed suspended in time, each heartbeat of their unborn child echoing like a drumbeat of fate. She swallowed hard, her lips parting slightly as if to respond. But no sound emerged, her courage warring with the vulnerability that surged through her. And she realized that the moment demanded no words. Only the unspoken understanding that they were irrevocably connected. Adrian's eyes softened further, the fire of anger and obsession tempered by awe and tenderness. And he allowed himself to linger on her, studying the subtle quiver of her lips, the faint tremble of her shoulders, the way her hands rested protectively over the small life growing inside her. And in that observation, he found both solace and pain. The silence stretched, thick and electric, each second heavy with the weight of unspoken apologies, promises, and fears. A tension that wrapped around them like a physical presence, impossible to ignore, impossible to resist. His other hand reached gently to brush a stray lock of hair from her face. A tender gesture that made her heart lurch, her body respond involuntarily. And her mind struggle to maintain the fragile control she had built over months of fear and hiding. He whispered again, quieter still, "I will not let anything happen to you. Or our child," the words a vow, a shield, a declaration that he had changed, that he had seen the error of his anger, and that he would dedicate himself to their safety and their future. Isabella's breath hitched, a tear slipping down her cheek, and she brushed it away quickly, a mixture of relief, fear, and love washing over her, the emotions clashing violently within her chest. The ultrasound screen glowed softly beside them, the tiny heartbeat steady. A reminder of their shared responsibility, their connection, and the miracle that had brought them together even through months of separation and secrecy. Adrian's eyes never left the screen for long, returning constantly to her face, tracing every line, every flicker of emotion, every indication of fear or hope. And his fingers remained on her belly, a bridge between them, a grounding force that tethered them to this moment and to each other. She shifted slightly, leaning toward the bed's edge, her chest tightening with every inhale, the weight of months of secrets, fear, and longing pressing against her in waves. Yet she felt the undeniable pull of his presence, the security and intensity it brought, impossible to resist even as it terrified her. Adrian spoke again, soft and steady. "I've lost too much. Don't make me lose you again," and the words cut deep into her, resonating with every hidden fear and hope she carried. And she felt herself trembling, a mixture of surrender and determination, knowing she could not escape the truth of their connection. Her hands pressed instinctively against his, feeling the heat, the life, the undeniable presence of someone who would fight for them both, while simultaneously feeling the weight of danger he represented. A paradox she had always struggled to reconcile. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the warmth of his hands, the steadiness of his gaze, and the heartbeat of their child wash over her. And she allowed herself to feel something she had denied for far too long, safety intertwined with fear, love intertwined with longing. Adrian leaned closer, his breath brushing her hair, his voice a murmur, "I am here." Always, a vow of devotion and obsession. Each word vibrating with intensity, and Isabella felt the room shrink further, leaving nothing but their fragile bubble of shared emotions and the life that bound them together. She could feel the tension in his shoulders, the controlled power radiating from him even as his softness for her and the child shone through. And it made her chest ache, torn between fear and desire, between control and surrender. Each heartbeat of their unborn child pulsed in unison with her own, a tangible connection that seemed to synchronize them, a rhythm of life and love and fear all at once. She finally whispered, barely audible, I won't leave," a confession that held months of pain, longing, and secret love. And she felt Adrian's fingers tighten slightly on her belly, a silent acknowledgement of her words. A vow that he had heard her, that he understood, and that he would not let go. His eyes softened once more, glistening with unspoken emotion, and he stayed kneeling beside her, careful, deliberate, protective, and utterly present. The two of them locked in a fragile, powerful, and emotional moment that neither could escape. A moment that would define the next chapters of their lives. A confrontation of love and fear bound together in one breath. One heartbeat, one undeniable truth, before Isabella could even respond. A sharp buzz from Adrian's phone cut through the fragile silence, the device vibrating insistently in his pocket, and the color drained from his face as he glanced down at the screen. His eyes narrowing, a storm brewing behind them. A tension that made Isabella's chest tighten and her heart skip painfully, sensing that whatever news had arrived would shatter the temporary calm they had created together. She stared up at him, breath caught in her throat, as he muttered under his breath, a low growl filled with warning. "They found you," his words carrying weight and threat. And a cold shiver ran down her spine as the realization hit her that their brief moment of safety had ended, that danger was not just near, it was here. Outside the clinic window, the reflection of two black cars gliding silently onto the street made her stomach clench. A tangible symbol of the threat Adrian had just acknowledged. The menace of the world she had tried to hide from so carefully now pressing directly against them. A living shadow that could destroy everything in an instant. "Who?" she whispered, voice trembling, a mix of fear and disbelief. Unable to process the immediacy of the threat, and Adrian's expression hardened. His jaw setting, eyes flashing with lethal intent. Yet his movements remained controlled, precise. As he shifted his weight and knelt before her in one smooth motion, lifting her gently into his arms. A protective gesture that combined tenderness with undeniable danger. Her arms instinctively wrapped around his neck, clutching him tightly as her breath hitched. A mixture of fear and relief coursing through her. The warmth of his body a fragile shield against the storm that was closing in. And she felt the baby's small movements inside her belly. A tiny heartbeat echoing her own rapid pulse, reminding her of what they had to protect. Adrian's eyes, dark and fierce, met hers for a fleeting second. softening just enough to convey reassurance. A silent vow that he would not allow harm to come to either of them. And then his gaze returned to the street, sharp and calculating. Scanning the black vehicles, measuring the threat. And already plotting his next move with deadly precision. "Vincent DeLuca," he said, voice low, gravelly, each syllable carrying the weight of history, danger, and unyielding resolve. "He wants leverage against me. He wants our child." Isabella gasped, the words piercing her chest like ice and fire together. The full scope of danger crashing into her mind. The enormity of the threat against their child leaving her momentarily frozen, heart racing. Palms pressed to Adrian's shoulders as if seeking the unshakable safety he seemed to exude despite the peril. Adrian's grip on her tightened slightly, firm yet gentle. The strength in his arms a reminder that no one could reach them without facing him. And he lowered his voice, deadly soft, almost a whisper that carried both love and warning. "I lost you once. I won't lose either of you again." The intensity in his tone made her tremble. Knowing the depth of the promise, the danger he was willing to unleash to keep them safe. The lengths he would go to protect their child from anyone who dared to threaten them. Without another word, he stepped toward the clinic door. Each motion deliberate, confident, unhesitating. Carrying Isabella effortlessly, the tiny life within her a silent, constant reminder of what was at stake and why he would not allow compromise. The fluorescent lights of the clinic reflected off his wet hair and damp coat. Rain droplets sliding from the fabric as he moved. A visual testament to his relentless determination. His willingness to face anything that threatened them. And Isabella felt the weight of his presence. The absolute certainty that he would burn down any obstacle to keep them safe. And yet there was also an undeniable tenderness in his hold that made her heart ache with love and fear intertwined. The streets of Queens blurred around them as he carried her to the waiting car. His gaze flicking to the black vehicles that had parked ominously nearby. A silent calculation of threats and strategies. And she felt the adrenaline surge through her body. The tension of imminent danger mingling with the warmth of his protection. Creating a heady, almost unbearable mix of fear and relief. Adrian set her down gently in the back seat of the car. Still keeping one arm around her protectively. While the other hand rested lightly on the door handle. Ready to strike or flee at a moment's notice. His eyes scanning the surroundings with predator-like precision. Aware of every movement, every shadow, every possible threat. Isabella placed a hand on her stomach, feeling the small life within, and whispered softly, "I'm scared." Her voice barely carried, but it was heard entirely by him, and he leaned close, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face, his lips almost grazing her forehead as he murmured, "I know, Bella. I know. But I'm here. I will never let anyone hurt you, or our child." The words were a lifeline. A promise made in steel and love. And Isabella allowed herself to rest against him for a moment, breathing in the dangerous, intoxicating aura of the man who had once terrified her and yet now represented absolute safety. Adrian's phone buzzed again, but he ignored it. His full attention on Isabella, on their child. On the threat that loomed and the steps he would take to eliminate it. A calculated calm descending over him even as the city outside seemed alive with tension. He opened the car door, carrying her into the vehicle with ease. And the engine roared to life, a low growl matching the intensity radiating from him. A sound that promised destruction to anyone foolish enough to follow, a warning and a vow all in one. Rain splattered against the windows as the black cars followed briefly. But Adrian drove with precision, taking them through back streets, alleys, and side roads only he knew, every movement a calculated measure to ensure their safety while simultaneously sending a silent message to those who dared to pursue them. Isabella clung to him, feeling the strength in his arms. The warmth of his presence, the unshakable determination that radiated from every inch of his being. And she realized in that moment that nothing could touch them. Not while Adrian Moretti stood as their shield. As the dangerous promise he had made now carried into action. His eyes never left the rearview mirror. Constantly measuring, calculating, anticipating. A predator protecting what was his, and Isabella felt both awe and fear. A combination that left her trembling yet grateful for his presence. for his unwavering commitment, for the fact that their child was safe in his hands. Every muscle in his body seemed coiled, ready to react to any threat. And she understood that he would not hesitate to burn the city to the ground if it meant keeping them alive. A man capable of fury and tenderness in the same breath. A man driven by love, obsession, and an unshakable sense of protection. She rested her head against his shoulder, closing her eyes, allowing herself to finally exhale. And for the first time in months, she felt the weight of fear lessen slightly, replaced by the raw, undeniable power of being loved and guarded by someone who would move heaven and earth for them. The city lights flickered past the windows as Adrian navigated the streets, each turn and alley calculated to outmaneuver danger, while Isabella silently promised herself that she would never leave him again, that their child would grow in safety, and that whatever storms came, they would face them together. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside the car, a fragile bubble of safety, love, and resolve surrounded them, their bond strengthened by the shared fear and shared hope. A dangerous promise made tangible in action and presence. Adrian tightened his grip on her slightly, kissed her temple, and whispered one final vow: "No one will ever take you from me. Not now, not ever." And in that moment, Isabella believed him completely. Feeling the certainty of his words as the car disappeared into the rainy streets, carrying them away from danger, toward a future they would face together. Their love and their child safe under the protection of Adrian Moretti, a man who would stop at nothing to keep them unharmed. And in that rain-soaked night, with the city unaware of the storm passing through its streets, Isabella rested against him, tears mingling with rain, heart full, knowing that the danger remained outside but their bond was unbreakable. Their child safe, and their story, at last, had found its fierce, powerful ending. Your participation means a lot to the channel. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.